All right, guys, let's take a step back to 2017. 2017, San Francisco was the height of San Francisco's real estate department. 2017, people all around the world were scrambling to grab a small piece of San Francisco real estate. They have almost 200,000 office workers commuting to the place every single day. The BART train network was always packed, and internationally, this was the tech city, right? If you're doing anything tech related, you have to move to San Francisco if you want to grow, if you want to make connections. Because back then, working online wasn't really a thing. It was mostly after the pandemic, people start noticing, wow, there's so many better options, and San Francisco is pretty bad. There's open air drug markets anywhere, and let's just leave. And now San Francisco is no longer getting the commutes of 100,000 to 200,000 office employees. In fact, many hundreds and thousands of these office employees are now working outside of San Francisco and other nicer parts of the Bay Area, and many of them are actually leaving the Bay Area for other places, with many companies already relocating and Facebook now regretting signing a super ultra expensive lease at 181 Fremont, which is an absolutely beautiful building. It's kind of like the same thing as the Millennium Tower, except this one doesn't actually sink down and start tilting all the time. If you checked out this building, it's high end, right? Look at how good looking this building is. It's a very good looking building, earthquake resistant. Like 2 bedrooms will easily set you back like $2 to $3 million. Like this is as high end as you could get. And back in 2017, Facebook dropped $35 million to lease this building. And they're gonna be leasing like about 500,000 square feet of office space, more specifically 435,000 square feet. That is a massive amount of space. And guess what? Facebook spent about $80 signing the lease per square foot. $80 a square foot is a lot of money. And this is going to be $80 pretty much per year. And that is so much money Facebook is dropping on this office space, which just 5 years later is now completely empty. Meta has drastically reduced San Francisco's office space. Now, the downside of this is Meta actually signed the lease to 2031. So they really screwed up here, because who would have thought a pandemic would start, right? And who would have thought that after the pandemic, nobody wanted to work in an office anymore? So you have Meta dropping this much money. And even though there's no tenants here, they're trying to sublease this out, right? This is such a massive hit every single year for just empty space. They're still renting it out, right? They're still leasing the place because the contract doesn't end until 2031, which is still several years off. And Meta is still keeping one office in San Francisco, but many other offices around that building, like for example 181 Fremont, is completely empty. And vacancies are hitting an all-time high, which is pretty scary. And remember how I told you that Meta spent about $80 per square foot per year on this building? Well, if you check out the other prices, like for example 135 Main Street, it's still a great building and pretty much exactly the same location. In fact, I'll even argue that this is even better because it's one block from like the water. And it's $58 per square foot per year. Check out this one, 160 Spear Street. It's even cheaper. It's $44 to $45 per square feet. If you want to go a little further down, which is basically right next to the Salesforce building, if you want like a crappier building, get this one. It's as cheap as $30 a square feet. Remember, Facebook or Meta, they rented this for $80 a square feet. So pretty much double of what many of these buildings are offering. In fact, there's some very, very high class, high end retail buildings around the area that are pretty much going for cheap, like this one. 26,000 square feet, $29 a square feet. That is insanely cheap. And some of the nicer buildings, like if you want to go for like hard luxury, I guess you could check something like this out, right? You could inside like glass buildings. And guess what? It's like $49 a square feet. And I guarantee you, if you tell the landlord to knock it down like 5 square feet, $5 a square feet, they'll actually say yes, right? Because many of these offices are completely empty and rents are going down even further. And if you zoom a little further out, like if you go to other parts of the Bay Area, other parts of San Francisco, you could actually get some of these offices for even lower price. Like this one, around the Chinatown area, it's a pretty good location, $38 per square feet. You kind of get the gist. Like many of these buildings and per square footage wise are so low. In fact, many of the owners that are still paying mortgages on these towers and buildings are experiencing that, oh crap, we can't actually afford to pay the mortgage anymore because the rents are so low. And not to mention, it's okay if the rents are a little bit low, but it's not okay when nobody's renting at all. Vacancies, like you should see this, it's up to like 33.9%, a new record high for the city. And what's even worse is most of these buildings, it's not being honest. Like many of these buildings aren't honest at all because, yeah, it's 34% vacancies, but many buildings that are still leased out have only like a skeleton crew, meaning the moment their lease ends, they're going to downsize their office from, let's say, 30,000 square feet to maybe just 3,000 square feet. And we're seeing this everywhere. Like Airbnb recently did a massive office downgrade. They used to have like 3 different offices. Now they only have 1. Salesforce building, right? Salesforce building is over there, right next to the Leaning Tower of Millennium. And Salesforce has now pretty much gave up at a whole entire skyscraper and also one of these smaller buildings. You've also seen this building right here, Slack. They've also moved out, so this whole entire building is empty. But many of these buildings that are empty, for example, are still being leased out, like the Uber HQ in San Francisco near the Civic Center. It's like 250,000 square feet. They're trying to sublease it out. They're still leasing it, and they're still spending millions of dollars on it every year. But here's the thing. They can't cancel it. You signed a lease, you have to go through with it. And that's exactly what's happening here. And as time goes on, as more and more companies just leaving San Francisco, we're going to be seeing office vacancies go through the roof. And what's really funny is if you go to places like Miami, for example, it's one of the rare few places where a commercial office space is still sought after. And in fact, commercial office space is so bad in San Francisco. If you go to Hayes Point, for example, you see just an empty plot of land. This is supposed to be plans for a massive 47-story skyscraper with condos, apartments, and of course, over 300,000 square feet of office space, which now they've canceled the project, with many investors saying that they would not invest in this. Many investors do not want to give Hayes Point $1.2 billion because they're going to lose money out of this. This is when you start seeing the true collapse of San Francisco real estate, especially the office sector. And like I said before, a lot of office places are pretty bad. Like if you go to Hong Kong is like a high-end office apartment, right? You're not going to be getting any better offices in Asia than Hong Kong. Despite a lot of companies moving out because of what's going on, they still only have a vacancy rate of 15%. And many of their buildings are still selling for a lot of money. Same thing if you go to Manhattan, right? Vacancies are high. Yes, companies are moving out a little bit, but vacancies are only about like less than 18%. Same thing in Seattle. It's really not that high. But San Francisco is like 2 times as high as Hong Kong and New York City, which pretty much shows that San Francisco real estate is totally busted at this point. Nobody wants to come here, right? The crime is through the roof, and not to mention small business owners are pretty sick and tired of the whole entire situation. I think San Francisco really needs some really, really big drastic changes to get these companies back, because companies are leaving in droves and they're downsizing these offices like it's no tomorrow. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. More San Francisco and Bay Area real estate news to come.